So today I'm going to speak in English. For those of you who don't speak Chinese, not to worry. I will be speaking in English today. And I want to really thank Sophia University as well as SVIEF for hosting this talk. And I know that all of you present are really the top entrepreneurs, technologists who are based here in Silicon Valley and who have a special connection to China. So what I want to talk about today is really why China has succeeded so far in building this amazing internet market, and that the future is very, very bright. And for those of you who are thinking about doing something that's connected to China, that really this is the golden opportunity. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the Chinese internet market, probably pretty quickly since most of you are familiar. Then about some really unique Chinese opportunities that I think makes China a better market than anywhere else in the world. And then lastly, how we and others have exploited these opportunities to build amazing businesses. So if you look at the global market today, if you look at the kind of the Nasdaq valuation or the stock market valuation, you will find that about 2/3 of the world's market capitalization is United States, American companies. And then 2/3 of the remaining 1/3 are Chinese companies. So this may look like an American domination story. But actually, I remember back in the days when I first started at Google, and that would be almost 10 years ago. At that time, Google executives were discussing, so how much are Chinese companies worth? And we said, well, based on the Nasdaq publicly listed companies, the ratio was about, the equivalent company would be about 10-1. And today, if you look at the equivalent companies, in many cases, they're about equal. So if you draw the trajectory of the value of the Chinese companies, they've really greatly narrowed the gap between China and US. And I think the trajectory will continue for a number of very important reasons that I will discuss. China is a very special market. It is a huge market. There are 3 times more mobile users than the American market. If you believe and have heard something called the Metcalfe's law, the value of a network is about the equivalent to the square of the number of nodes in the network. So if China is 3 times larger, it ought to be 9 times more valuable than the American market. And this ratio will even grow further. And yet China is very low cost. You can build a very strong team with a much smaller spend. So building a startup is easier. China's mobile market in particular indicates this point. And if you look at all of China, you will see all the industries starting to become penetrated by the so-called Internet Plus. This is a very important policy of the current leaders, especially Li Keqiang is pushing really 2 initiatives that are at the forefront of his administration. The first one is called Internet Plus, and that basically means internet, mobile, social will reinvent all traditional industries. And this picture shows how from the left to right it is making that impact, and you can see we're nowhere near done. The other part that he promotes is really a entrepreneurship through the grassroots and through the masses, which we have a particular understanding, and I'll share that with you later. In China, where the government's policy is very, very important for any industry to grow or not to grow, we can see that we're actually, the wind is blowing in the direction that promotes further use of technology to enhance existing business value. At the same time, we also know that in China, competition is very, very fierce. And that fierceness was caused by an abundance of venture capital, which began over almost 15 or 20 years ago. The VC community was built almost magically in China through the beginnings where IDG, Sequoia, and later many other VC firms. And you can consider my company, Innovation Works in China, as a company that is in the same way investing money in a greatly growing market. And as more and more capital pour into this, it creates a very competitive market. One of the bad habits of Chinese as a country or a people is that people all rush into something that's exciting. Okay? You may have heard a joke that said a bunch of if a Jewish person starts a gas station on an empty road and starts to make money, more Jews will come in and build restaurants and bars and everything to fill the ecosystem. If a Chinese person starts a gas station and makes money, everybody will open a gas station. So that has been the phenomenon. So people rush in, they fight hard, the rewards are phenomenal, and this has become a very, very tough marketplace. And these are some examples. Probably the biggest example was how Qihoo 360 and Tencent had an amazing fight several years ago. I won't go into details later. Those of you who are Chinese know the stories very well. But lots of users, lots of money, lots of competitors who are not afraid to do similar things and learn from each other and even copy each other or compete very fiercely, results eventually in very high competition. But high competition actually has certain benefits. It means the resulting companies and business models are more robust. So if you look at a company, let's say like eBay in the United States, their business model is actually not very robust because they're overcharging for people who want to list products. Their entry barrier, arguably, if someone wants to throw billions of dollars into the auction market and they charge nothing to the seller, there's a possibility that a competitor can come out of nothing, out of nowhere, if they had a lot of money. In China, people learning and copying from each other has resulted in companies that said, okay, I need to build a business model that is invulnerable to price war. Namely, I need to give away everything in order to own the users. Then I'll figure out how to make money. So these types of very fierce fights resulted in very strong and very robust companies in China. And that also leads to new opportunities about Chinese companies going worldwide. Because arguably the equivalent Chinese company, a Taobao, is more ready for global adoption than an eBay. Now, neither one's very easy because of the nature of e-commerce, but the Taobao business model is stronger than eBay's. And you can look for many other similar types of companies. Qihoo 360's model is more fortified than Symantec's business model because under tough competition, they've had to basically give away everything to own the user and then figure out business models to make money later. And that is also another reason that means the Chinese companies will last longer and will be able to go abroad over time in the future. So that's kind of the internet market. It's got a lot of companies that are very tough and worth a lot of money, and more money is pouring in, more users are coming on board, and it's a very exciting market. Now let's think about innovation and what that really means, because those of you based in Silicon Valley, when you say innovation, you probably first think about Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and examples like that. But those of you who grew up in China would probably not be surprised that really aren't Steve Jobs or Elon Musks in China, or even in Asia for that matter. And that has a lot to do with the education system in which we grew up, that the strengths are not necessarily with the ability to think out of the box and do crazy things and with a dream to change the world, but rather there are other characteristics that makes the Chinese businesses successful. If you think about is Tencent innovative? People will probably say no, not at all compared to Apple or Tesla. But if you think again, if you were able to go into a time machine to, let's just say, 5 years ago, okay, to visit yourself 5 years ago and show them what you're able to do in WeChat, I think that version of you 5 years ago would be blown away and probably say this is the most innovative product I've ever seen in software, right? So I think there must be something about these Chinese companies that actually end up with products that look very innovative, but that maybe the company culture doesn't have a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk. So there must be something unique about China and the Chinese entrepreneurs that has made it successful, and there are more abilities for us to leverage those uniqueness to find and invest in and build more great companies in the future. So now if we take a step back and let's say it is proven that Chinese companies can and do build innovative products, they just do it differently. So why is it that these products emerged in China? Why isn't WeChat a Finland product, right? Why isn't Taobao an Israeli product, right? These are Finland, Israel are great countries for innovation. But why did these amazing products that are making so much money, why did they come from China? Okay, so I want to explore why this happened. Also, let me make a point that probably, did any of you read The Lean Startup? The Lean Startup, very few. How about 0 to 1? Everybody reads that one, okay. Both are very good books. And what I'm about to talk about is that these two books talks about how to found a great company and build it in the new age of internet, mobile, and social. And what I want to elaborate is that if you apply them to the unique characteristics of China, you will actually get great things out of it. That the ideas that are proposed in these two books are quite applicable to China. As an example, how do you find a great idea on which to iterate and build a lean startup? How do you find that area of the small monopoly, right, that Peter Thiel says we have to go build? How do you find that thing? And what I want to share with you is that finding that great business area or idea or opportunity is much easier in China than it is in the US, and I'll tell you why. So let me first talk about some unique parts about Chinese talent and Chinese people. Then let me talk about some unique aspects about the Chinese market and regulations that makes it easier to find a great company, so that you'll see that the emergence of WeChat or the emergence of Taobao is not an accident, that it happened in China because China is a more fertile place where you will find more golden ideas than looking for the similar ideas in the United States. Now, first on talent. So if the Chinese people are not Steve Jobs and out of box, what are special characteristics of Chinese people? Well, the number one is hardworking. This picture is Tencent's Shenzhen headquarters at 2 a.m. What you see are taxis ready to take people home. And in Silicon Valley, we take our entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley a lot. And the last time they came and went back and said they're amazed at the out-of-the-box thinking at Silicon Valley, but they're also equally amazed at how lazy, or I should say how less hardworking people are here. That if you go to, I wouldn't name any names, but if you went to one of the more established brands in Silicon Valley, you'll find parking lots are empty at 7 or 9 or 11, whereas this is what you see in Shenzhen. So the Chinese people, as engineers, as entrepreneurs, just simply work harder than the equivalent Americans. Second key characteristic of the Chinese people is ability to execute with speed, very, very fast. The example we give here is by a building company called the Broad Group, but they're able to build a luxury hotel in 15 days. And I think if you look at the speed at which WeChat iterates its code base, right? Or the ability of Chinese companies, how fast they move their products. I think that speed and execution is paramount. So maybe the Chinese people are less creative and innovative, but they work harder and they execute more quickly. So if you go back and think about the Lean Startup as a book, what it's really about is the ability to find an idea, make a hypothesis, execute and prove it, and then iterate and pivot. That's what startups are more about today. And it's more about how fast you can execute, less about how brilliant you are, as out-of-box thinking you are. And tenacity and focus are also very important, because people who are very smart tend to have a lot of great ideas. And in startups and technology companies, smaller technology companies, it's more important to be focused so that you can do one thing well and then move on to the next. Whether you look at the Lean Startup as a book or 0 to 1 as a book, it's all about being focused and getting that landing, the landing space, build the initial product, whether it's Facebook's initial product that became successful at Harvard, or other companies that began were the WeChat's first version, which is really more about being better and cheaper than text messaging, and then getting that user base covered and then growing to the next level. So the focus is very important. In a company led by a smart person, if they have a new idea every day, the employees will become randomized, and then they will try everything and not win at any of them. So these are some of the key characteristics of the Chinese people or engineers or entrepreneurs. That really means when you're able to build a company with engineers that are hardworking, with great tenacity, very focused, and ability to execute and speed, then you really have a company that is more suited for the startup that is needed for today. So if we take some typical role models on the left and the right, you will see that there are some similarities between American great entrepreneurs and Chinese great entrepreneurs. They both have passion for user and products and focus, but the American entrepreneurs on the left side tend to be more creative and have more team-oriented, and the Chinese entrepreneurs on the right will tend to have strong leadership, what they say goes, and they're able to execute very quickly. And take Lei Jun as an example, right? The fact that Xiaomi was able to very rapidly, evolve so many models of the phone and get up to 60 million units in sales in just 5 years of operations is all about excellence in execution. And on top of that, a lot of great things are happening. In China, there are, when we started at 创新工厂, we actually couldn't find a lot of serial entrepreneurs. So we had to make do with people who have less experience. And we ended up building more of kind of incubation type of environments to help them with providing services. But in the past 5.5 years since we started, the serial entrepreneurs are emerging. When we started 5.5 years ago, the best experienced entrepreneur we could find would be engineering manager or product director from a Baidu or Alibaba or Tencent. And then we often have to go with someone with no experience at all, just out of school or with 2 years as an engineer. But today, you look at the top funded companies in China, there are many serial entrepreneurs emerging. The first company we funded now has 10 more people who are CEOs in new companies. So that 100 people who were employed by the first company we funded now is sort of the mother of 10 more companies whose people went through the first time in the company we funded and now are doing their second entrepreneurial effort. So the emergence of serial entrepreneur will make China even greater as a place where great companies come out of. And not only are serial entrepreneurs emerging, there are post-95 entrepreneurs emerging. That is, people who are in their early 20s and occasionally even their late teens founding companies. Those of you who were educated in China 15 years ago probably find that hard to believe. In fact, when we first started 5.5 years ago, I wrote a special letter to graduates of school that says, finish your school and don't become an entrepreneur just yet, because the environment is tough and you have no experience. But in the last trip that I took to Beijing, I met with an entrepreneur who's 23, who's already founded 5 companies. Wow. And he finished 1 year of school. He was a dropout, so he is now 5 years of experience, founded 5 companies. He said, Kai-Fu, I want to talk to you because I liked your book, but I really don't want your money because my company's worth too much and you can't afford me. And then he said, my company has 30 people, 20 of them are dropouts like me. I personally believe that anyone who tolerates 4 years of school in this kind of a university system isn't really qualified to be a great entrepreneur. So I'm not saying I believe in what he said, but that is what he said. These people were non-existent 5 to 6 years ago, but now they're doing great. And you see that kind of self-confidence, maybe a little bit of arrogance in the great dropouts of the American entrepreneurial system. So if China did so great with people who are really non-traditional entrepreneurs, right? If you look at Lei Jun, right? He's a professional manager, right? If you look at Pony Ma, he was just an engineer. And look at Jack Ma, who's an English teacher. So with these unusual, non-traditional entrepreneurs, China did so great. Now with serial entrepreneurs and these brilliant dropouts, I think the best future is yet to come. So that's with the talent who start companies. But let's talk about Chinese demographics. So we all know about the size of the China market, so I won't say more about that. But the market is largely populated in big cities. There's a huge migration to large urban areas, and the density of Chinese cities is much more dense than in the US. So when you're about to build a shared economy company, let's say one about ride sharing or delivery of goods or delivery of services, it makes much more sense to do it in China. Imagine if you were to start, let's say, a shared economy home cleaning company. Just randomly pick an example. If you were to do it in Kansas, that would be pretty tough because your one customer to next customer, you might be driving 30 minutes or something. But if you're in Beijing, you might be cleaning one neighbor, and then you open your phone and there are 5 more people who want your service within walking distance. So in a highly dense urban population, China is well suited for the growth of these types of companies. So if you look at some examples here, I'll use the right hand as an example. Helijia is an amazing company that basically does nail polish and manicure. And because real estate is expensive, people want to look pretty, but they want also be surrounded by other people, and you want to save money from rent, you want to be convenient to people, so they have these little vans that are able to provide the services. And now they employ 3,000 nail technicians, and they're worth $200 million. That's an example. It would be hard to imagine doing that in Kansas. Maybe New York City, probably not. Parking may be too expensive and hard. So you find these unique opportunities that makes O2O or shared economy possible. And and actually one other point related to that is if you think about one of the challenges that China faces as a manufacturing economy is the massive number of blue-collar workers and the unavoidable future where robotics and potentially moving factories to even cheaper places for manufacturing. So there are a lot of people who are working on fairly low wages. And these, while on a national economy level, that might be worrisome on the 5-year horizon, this set of people becomes a very powerful workforce when it comes to shared economy. I think, so when we think about Premier Li's message to let everybody be an entrepreneur, the way I think about it is that I think he does not really expect everyone to, tens of millions of people to try to become a Jack Ma or a Lei Jun. What I think he's saying is, let anyone who has a chance aspire to and do great entrepreneurship the way we're talking about it here. But these entrepreneurship will use the power of internet to create a lot of job opportunities. And when we say job opportunities, we don't mean just engineering job opportunities, but when shared economy starts to really rejuvenate or make opportunities happen for the existing economy. When these, if you are a blue-collar worker making maybe $500 or $600 a month, the opportunity to be a nail technician that can pay $1,000 a month is a wonderful thing to aspire to, or house cleaning, or barber, or many of the service opportunities of food delivery. So I think the whole China economy is going to be rejuvenated with the fact that urban consumers are very dense, shared economy opportunities are really great, and a huge supply of relatively low salary people who will look up to doing jobs like this is going to really inject a lot of power into the shared economy that will emerge. But another aspect of China is government policy. When I meet with most people in most countries, they ask me about how the national policy is slowing down entrepreneurship because it takes how will the Uber driver get approved and things like that. But in China, yes, there's issues with that too, but China is well known to be very decisive with policies. So it is very effective in coming up with new policies. So if you're an entrepreneur or an investor who studies new changes in the government policy, you will find many more opportunities because these things are, you have to really think about it and to dig for these opportunities. For example, in the free trade zone in Shanghai and Shenzhen that's established, if you studied that and found that, you would have realized that, wow, it's a lot easier to sell cars online as a result, especially import cars. These are implications that follows each national law that changes. If you study how drinking under the influence can be punished with 6 to 9 months in jail, all of a sudden you'll see that having a designated driver is a great thing, and that's an online business opportunity. So China has more opportunities because government makes these quick decisions, and then if you study these, each decision is a big opportunity. So this one talks in more detail about the opportunity to buy automobiles online. And then another opportunity really is that the existing incumbents in the marketplace are full of problems. China as a traditional economy is much weaker than the United States in terms of transparency, fairness, and equal opportunity. Taking automobiles, that example we just gave, in the US, there is Edwards and Consumer Report, so we really know how much a car dealership makes. You really know when you buy a second-hand car what it's worth. You're not so worried about getting ripped off. But the so-called bid and ask prices of cars in China is a big black box. And the markup that you have when you buy, if you buy a BMW in China, your service bill is probably dramatically higher than in the US. You really don't have any transparency about costs of how to fix your car, update your car, add a GPS, or you're changing a muffler. In the US, there is greater transparency, also greater already known established brands. When you go to a Jiffy Lube, you know you're not going to get ripped off, and you know they're not going to charge you too much. But in China, these brands are also missing. So when we talk about incumbents, the fact is that incumbents are greedy, bureaucratic, inefficient. So the current users of these products offered by the incumbents suffer what the incumbents are doing to them. They're being overcharged. They're being given false information. The user satisfaction is much lower. So in the US, if you're about to start a shared economy company, let's say you want to do, let's make up something randomly, let's say you want to do an online a shared economy Jiffy Lube. Well, it's going to be hard to do because people may feel Jiffy Lube is providing you a service that's B+. Now you're doing A-. There's not a strong enough user imperative to switch from the existing traditional Jiffy Lube to the online. But if the Chinese Jiffy Lube equivalent is a non-existent, non-branded entity, and the random store you go to has poor service, high prices, you're dealing with a C- company. Now your A- thing will offer a strong user imperative to switch to you. So the fact that the China economy has a lot of inefficiencies and lack of transparency and fairness and people getting ripped off, it's all the more great opportunity for the online companies to become a digital-first company. That's how Helijia became so successful, and that's how other companies can do the same. One could look back and say Jingdong and Taobao and Alibaba became successful because the Chinese traditional commerce retail system is very non-transparent, and the pricing is a black box that rips people off. So if you're in a third-tier city, and 10 years ago you went into a store, there are probably multi-tiers of distribution that's taking unreasonable profit. So you as a consumer got ripped off. So that's why Taobao could spread so quickly, because it had, while its services aren't perfect, but it's a lot better than what you've got. So there's a lower competitive point for a digital-first startup to compare against. Therefore, there's more things to look to find. Another example on the right is real estate. Another area, it's the same thing in China. I recently sold a house in China, and it's amazing that how these agents and pseudo agents and how they bring in and don't tell you what their commission is. So, I've got this customer, but first you have to agree not to say this and that, and then we'll do this, and the price you pay is this. You're willing to sell at this price, right? Okay. Oh, and then they come back saying, oh, by the way, there's an extra 1% that was commissioned for me, but you said you sell for this price. So this is a true story I personally went through. But in the US, there's no such thing. When you go to an Elam Canal or a Coldwell Banker, or you go to an online broker, it's all transparent. You know what the broker is making. But the lack of transparency means if you have an online mechanism, whether it's Fangduoduo as a company that's become very successful in China, that's now doing a 2014 GMV of 30 billion, or some of the companies we funded, you can see that inefficiency is being cracked down very rapidly. So in the market, there's more inefficiencies. It also creates more opportunities for startups. The example of Yuebao in China is another example. Banking is another space of, I guess it's not lack of transparency. We all know what bid and ask and interest rates they're offered. It's terrible. Right? When you make a deposit, the interest rates are very low. When you take a loan, the interest rate is very high. They're not afraid to share that fact because no one can start a bank in China. So when a small business takes a loan, he or she could easily be paying a 40% interest at a local bank. That is if they could get a loan. Only about 12% of small businesses are qualified at all to apply for a loan. So, in the US, there's Lending Club. It's targeting at one single thing that seems a little bit high, which is the credit card interest rate. But in China, everything's high. So there's not just one Lending Club. There's lots of companies that are ongoing that if someone's paying 40% interest rate, well, what if we could do a P to small business, right? Everybody come in, I'll give you a 10% interest rate, and I'll loan you the money for 30%. So before, the small businesses have to pay 40% or not get any loan at all. Now you can just pay 30%, you're happy to pay that. Then the consumer comes in at 10%. That's a great deal. Then, of course, the gas station story starts to happen. More people come in. Eventually, Yuebao and Lujinsuo and Renrendai and all of those, well, eventually the bid and ask price will come too close to each other. But in the meantime, one of the Lujinsuo is now worth $10 billion in valuation. So it's creating a lot of, so for everyone who can find these inefficiencies and lack of transparency, there's a $1 billion unicorn that's out there. And there are lots of them. So the same ideas in the US and China, there are just more opportunities in China. And of course that relates to the value of the brands. China has a much newer economy, so it doesn't have these 100-year-old brands like the Wall Street Journal in the US or Disney. As an example, in publishing, taking it as an example, the old established brands are still pretty strong. You might think that on your Kindle you can get anything digital, but if you look at who's making the money still, some of the money is still being made by the publishers at Random House or whichever other company in the middle. It's very hard for an individual to actually publish a book and get it sold with any sort of revenue. I tried. My book sold over 1 million copies in China, but when I put it on Amazon, we sold about 46. So in order to sell more, I still have to go beg a book agent to go to Random House. So actually the market is not at all equal, free, or democratized in the US. But relatively speaking, if you're a writer of fiction in China, you're actually better off than in the US or UK. J.K. Rowling may take 10 years to get her book published and popularized and make lots of money, and another 5 years for the movie to make money. In China, it's actually quite different. There are existing platforms for writing, such as 起点中文网, 中文在线, where a new author can put something online for everyone to read, and then compete with each other for popularity. Once the popularity is proven, they can charge money, then they get cross-license, and then the book can become a comic, animated series, or a TV show, or a movie, and there are lots of licensing revenue stream that can start to come in. So a J.K. Rowling in China arguably could make money from the book in 1 year, and make money from movie and games in 2 years. Okay, you could say, hey, that's hypothetical, but it's not. There's an example of Youyaoqi as a platform in China. It's a platform basically for comics, and lots of amateurs publish their comics on it, and the ones that are popular can start to make money. This is a company we invested in. Its valuation is over $100 million. I think it can be a lot more in the future. Lots of people go online and are able to publish comics first. So here is an example of a amazing writer and actually a studio that the husband and wife writer team operates. They basically wrote something called 10万个冷笑话 as a comic series, initially free. Then they became very, very popular, and there were 2 billion broadcasts. Then they could start to charge money online and make money from advertising. But they became so popular, they actually made an animated movie with a low budget that became one of the top 3 big box office hits. The #1 box office hit in the history of animated films in China. The production costs are very, very tiny. And we're actually an investor in the studio as well. So China is a space where platforms, licensing, and content creation is actually lower friction than in the US, because there were no giants. There's no Disney and Marvel Entertainment standing in the way. And actually, if you were far-sighted enough to found a company like Youyaoqi or like Bilibili, I know many of you saw Bilibili recently with certain content. And I know that you also probably saw 暴走漫画, that's also our investment, or 求是百科. So in the market where there are very few established brands, new internet company founding opportunities exist. And this is just in the content area, but you can extrapolate to 100 different businesses, and they're all like that. So now you've got a market that is huge in size, and you've got entrepreneurs who are hardworking, get stuff done, and you've got urban cities with very tight populations, and you've got lots of workers who are willing to work for very low wages, and you've got no established brands, and you study national policy, and you've got weak traditional competitors. Now you can imagine why China has been so successful. Because if you are an internet-minded, mobile, social-minded person, you are so advanced in terms of looking for opportunities, looking for weak opponents, looking for great employees, looking for great business opportunities in user base, you just have a much higher chance of being successful. So hopefully with that, I've convinced you to go start a company in China. Now, I'm not done with my talk. The last part is, okay, with that situation, how do you found the company? So hopefully some of you are thinking, wow, I could do really well in China. How do I go start a company? Before I go into the how, I do want to also say the opportunity for overseas returnees is dramatically changing compared to the past. With the Robin Lee and Charles Zhang, the VCs loved returnees. Then I think for a period of time, returnees lost touch, and then investors sometimes prefer non-returnees but local entrepreneurs. But now the times are changing again, because you are now immersed with these great shared economy and other ideas in the US. Now if you'll be connected with the Chinese opportunities, you've got the best of both worlds. And also, you're all connected on WeChat, so you're not disconnected. You're connected to your friends, your network, you're connected and read三十六课 and other great online content, so you know what's happening. So really the opportunity for a returnee is better, as is the chance of creating a global company. So with that, what should we do? The first step, I think, is all about finding the opportunity, is identifying growth trend, but also analyzing Chinese opportunities. So identifying growth trend, that's what we're supposed to do as venture capital. These are 6 trends that at InnovationWorks we analyzed, and some of the in China that we analyzed and invested in. And then on the left are some of the things I talked about that are unique Chinese characteristics. So if you're someone who can identify great trends based on what's happening in Silicon Valley, or someone who understands Chinese policy, weak competitors, then you think about this opportunity. This is where I think the Lean Startup is maybe a little bit non-specific in terms of how to start a company. The Lean Startup talks about trying ideas, verifying markets, and then verifying with the minimal cost before jumping in. I think that's all great, but this really says, well, don't just find a small user with a small number of users with a specific pain, but be thinking about global trends, be thinking about competitiveness, be thinking about unfair competitive advantages. So if you go out in Silicon Valley or United States, the street is not filled with gold because there's great transparency, and what you know everyone else knows, and the competitors are tough. Even traditional ones are pretty good. But in China, if you go in with an eagle eye, you're much more likely to spot a trend with a local opportunity or local weakness that can be exploited. So that's the first thing to do. When you do a startup, don't be just like Lean Startup and try to find a small user and see, quote unquote, see what happens later. Be very mindful of what opportunity lies ahead. Pick the one that is the biggest. It's very unique. It's very unique because everyone wants to get into a great school, wants to go to the US, wants to score high on exams. So they said, okay, what is something that we could really do that appeals to people and market directly? And then they said, well, why don't we just have a thing that allows a student to take a picture of a problem they can't solve? And then we'll use the wisdom of crowds and automation to give them the answer. What could be faster than that? And that became a great starting point of this company that built a very, very strong base by finding that initial user need in the market that's very much needed. Another company that we funded called Foxfish, 盒子鱼, they looked at a similar problem. All the Chinese students want to score high on their English, but the Ministry of Education and the school will never change the textbook. So it feels like we're stuck. The best we can do is English tutor or on the side. Well, we can't possibly go into schools because then we got to live with the textbook and the exams, and those things aren't designed with interactivity and iPad and all video and all that good stuff. So the people at Boxfish found an interesting solution. They said, well, why don't we just leave things be? We can't change the things that can't be changed. So the textbook is what they are, the exams is what they are, but we're going to create a series of brand new interactive courseware that's suitable for teacher-student interaction that leads to higher scores. So as a result, at Beijing Sizhong, they improved the people who got kind of the A rating from 40% of the students now to 80%. So it goes to show that you can find these really great opportunities, and it's very hard for other people to come in and do the same. So getting that small beachhead and small monopoly, whether it is these guys who figured out how to take a picture and get an answer rapidly, or the Boxfish people who figured out how to improve score very, very, very quickly, get their initial beachhead. But in China, where commoditization and copycat behavior is still substantial, it's really not good enough. You really got to figure out how to do your expansion very well. The top chart here shows you something that's an opportunity and a huge challenge because now there's 700 million mobile users. If you're onto something, When Yuan Tiku said, we got this, take a picture and answer my question. Or when Boxfish says, we can improve English score, be careful, because there might be 100 other companies that want to do the same. So if you're in a position to find, if you're lucky and smart enough to find that small beachhead, well, you better now take the next step and figure out how to expand rapidly. Because if you don't rapidly expand, these copycats will leave you basically leave you in the dust, because they might execute more quickly. This is where the first mover might not be an advantage. Whoever gets to expand quickly has the advantage. So how do you expand quickly? Well, there are a couple of key things you have to think about. One is people think about, okay, let's get $50 million in funding and throw the money and get traffic and get more users. That's actually, generally speaking, not a good thing to do, okay? Because your monopoly is not worthwhile if you start with a small monopoly and end up with a very scattered market. You want to keep going from the small monopoly to a larger monopoly, that is, to the monopoly in a larger space. So in the space of travel, for example, one of the companies we funded is called Yao Chufa. And if you look at, are they a monopoly in the travel business? No, of course not. They're tiny compared to Ctrip and others. They built wonderful growth. But if the growth were based on getting, random 1%, let's say, I don't know what percent of the travel they have. They probably have less than 1%. Let's say they have 1% of the travel market, e-travel market in China. If they actually got 1 out of 100 of random travel deals in China, even if their traffic grew like this, it's not worth very much, because it's not focused, it's not defensible, and it's not a monopoly. What they actually did is their 1% is very, very valuable, because they actually they're the market leader in terms of traveling by driving. So earlier they saw the trend, more Chinese families have cars. So instead of flying to travel for leisure and family travel, why don't we find ways to help people get enjoyable car driving over the weekend stay? So they became #1 in that market, which equates to maybe less than 1% of the travel market, but it doesn't matter, because they have a monopoly on a tiny market. And then once they get that, once they became well-known, people start saying, wow, that's a good, interesting opportunity, then it's time to figure out your expansion. So when you're just starting and getting that tiny monopoly, what they did was they started that in just one province. And when that became successful, they quietly expanded to 2 provinces, 3 provinces. When that became successful, then it came time to go raise $50 million and go all over the place before somebody copies your idea and tries to compete with you. So the growth is very, very fast, but you got to kind of pick the right timing. You also have to be very clever to pick of course, the least expensive mechanism possible, the most leverage possible. So Xiaomi, as an example, Beijing was very clever to use Weibo as an expansion vehicle. In the early days, when Weibo was very, very popular, and also basically you could do it very cheaply. So find channels that are relatively inexpensive, that can be linearly scalable. That means if you put $1,000 to get 1,000 leads, you better be able to put $1 million to get 1 million leads. If you can only get 1,000 leads, then the channel stops, then you haven't done the expansion. So it's all about finding effective channels to grow the business very, very quickly and maintaining your monopoly. And once you've done that, you kind of stabilize, you get a big growth, stabilize, then you look for the next opportunity. Then I think standard business book things start to happen. One of the companies we funded is Meitu. So they basically looked at all the things that can take pictures and become beautiful. And first they did photos, then they did PC photos and phone photos, beautification. Then they went into taking videos. Then they started building their camera. So basically expanding into adjacent markets. This is pretty straightforward, not Chinese specific. And then once you build a wonderful franchise, you need a defensible moat. Okay. There are ways to build moat that are maybe very expensive to build and maybe take a lot of criticism. When Amazon decided to build Kindle, that was an example, lost a lot of money, then finally proven, wow, you can make money after the big investment. selling so many machines at no profit. Another example is Jingdong. They actually built a gigantic warehouse, after figuring out the biggest part of the profit, the lack of profit, the ability to get to profit came from people who ordered multiple items and that had to be shipped from multiple warehouses. Because the profit margin is already very small. If you have to send it in 5 packages, your postage and your delivery eats into your profit. So they said, well, one big answer is to build a gigantic, biggest warehouse. That was a huge expense item that made them unprofitable for a long time, but ultimately it became a barrier of entry for other companies in e-commerce, as an example. And something that the Chinese companies are even better at in building a moat is the early recognition that competitors will come in with price competition. So the best way to do that, and second observation is the amazingly high cost of user acquisition. If you look at e-commerce and any other type of company, they don't make money because the cost to get a user is too expensive. So what companies actually do is the Chinese freemium model of the moat, which means I want to offer things to you, let you have it for free, and let you have lots of it for free, continuously for free, so you will never think about going to a competitor, and they can't come in and price cut me because I'm free. They're not going to give you money, so I got you as a user. Then I've saved user acquisition costs, and I'll figure out how to make money later. This is most representative in the Chinese games. If you look at Crossfire by Tencent, and then a similar product in the US, the Tencent example is like 20 times more profitable because they let people play for free. And the other product in the West, basically you pay a one-time charge to buy the game, then you play as much as you want. Tencent says you can play for free, you can have lots of fun, but if you really ever want to win or survive, you got to pay money. Then you've got the phenomenon where maybe 5% of the users end up paying 95% of the revenue of the product, and they became wildly successful as a result. Another example is Qihoo 360. They offer internet security for free, updates for free, but they have other ways to make money, which most of you know. So these are examples of the Chinese it's a freemium, not premium. So basically, this is about monopoly maintenance to make it so difficult for people to copy you and sell your product for free by offering it for free to begin with. And of course, that goes well with the Chinese VC system with so much money to pump in. So these are some examples. I won't go into details here. So what we try to do at China's Innovation Works is that we want to build a company that is designed to leverage these advantages that I talked about. So in the past 6 years, we've grown from tiny space on the upper left to 5,000 square meters of space, 300 plus co-founders, and 7,000 plus people who are employed by these companies. And we now manage about $500 million of money, and then we have a team that really takes the following approach to venture capital, which is quite a bit different. On the upper left, we identify trends, and we also identify local inefficiencies. So we are the ones who find that, importing automobiles is possible. Designated driver is an opportunity. Shared rides can offer companionship. So we're making these observations based on our knowledge of local policy, competitiveness, and availability of the workforce. And then we find people who are likewise minded, who share the same vision and belief with us. And then we start we fund the company. We want to give them the first angel or seed money whenever possible. And then we help them grow the team and then build it and then market it, expand it. And we have a 50-person team who are dedicated to doing that on the upper right. And after that, I think many other VCs do the same. We want to double down on the ones that work well. And then if we miss the chance to seed somebody, we're happy to go in at Series A. So basically, the top 2 is our secret sauce, and that secret sauce has everything to do with understanding the Chinese opportunities and inefficiencies. And the second part has everything to do with helping the company growing even faster and lowering its risk by having experts who help the team go from 0 to 1. So we have become a top brand, and these are some of the portfolio companies we have. We've got about 20 companies now valued over $100 million, and hopefully there will be a lot more, and hopefully some of you will work with us. We have a special team that is a part of our overall fund that is just been named Idea Bulb Ventures. So if you want to found a company here or get in contact with us, Chris Efdeman, who will moderate the next panel, is the person to get to know. We're also making investments in the US with the strong belief that while US and China have gone their separate ways, there's a lot of learnings between them, and also some opportunities to go abroad both ways. And we want to become the people who fund the best companies on both sides. We've made over 20 investments here in the Silicon Valley, and we want to use this talk as kind of an opening to get to know you. If you want to get in touch with us, on the lower right is an email that you can write to. And with that, I thank you very much and hope we have a chance to take advantage of the great growth in China. Thank you.